Okay, so here we go. I had the camera set up earlier and I went through about half my testimony and it didn't record it, so I got to start over. I'm sweating a little bit here. I'm out in the garage. It's been hot the last couple of days. Really hot tonight. But I just want to say, hey, people may not know who I am. My name's Randall Sorber, and I'm live in a small town outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. Town called Hamilton. For the people that do know me and know who I am, I just want to say I hope you get a chance to watch this and maybe it touches your life. Maybe it opens your eyes. I don't know, but this is my story. How God changed my life and what He's done for me. Uh, Actually, from the time I was 12 or 13 up until this point right now. But when I got saved when I was 42, September 25th, 2008, coming up on that date today. And for some reason I put this necklace on, and on the back of it, it's been inscribed the date that I got saved and the date that I got baptized, which was like 1 month later, in October 26th or 27th. But this is my story. I wanted to share it with you. I've been talking about doing it for some time and putting it off. But after church tonight and what was spoken at church and what the lady said, got up and God gave her a word called This Is My Story. I said I got to do this video, and I'm set up out here in the garage to do it. Sitting out here, sitting on the bike, and so I'm just going to go back to 2007, 2008. That's the time that God started knocking on my heart, drawing me, and I battled with it for a year before I surrendered my life over. But I kind of want to talk to you how that went, and God started calling me in about 2007 or 2008, and a buddy of mine, his name's Russell. He and I had been friends for many years. We used to go roller skating together and things like that. But he come over to my house at the time. I was living out on Gilmore. For the people that know the area and know what I'm talking about, I'm going to use some people's names and streets that you may know. For the people that are just going to see this video, deal with it. You understand. But Jalen come out to my house either to pick up some money, or he was gonna pay me some money, because we both do construction work, remodel, restoration, and we help one another out. Like if somebody needs some help or got a job or whatever, so we just help each other out. And we've always done that between him and I and other friends of mine. So he would come out, and I was in the garage listening to the radio, probably, WBN or something like that at the time, maybe a country station, and working in the garage, cutting the grass, whatnot. So, like I said, I'm doing the video out here in the garage because, kind of that's what really started for me in the garage, and Jalen come out, and he was sitting in his truck, and I had my music up pretty loud. He said, "Here, man, take this CD and listen to that. This here." He said, "That's better than that junk you're listening to." And I was like, "Oh, I'll take and maybe listen to it sometime." It was a Christian CD. It was a local group from our area that was together for a few years and played all over and changed a lot of people's lives. They're no longer together, but later on I became friends with most of the band members and knew who they are, and told them how their music changed my life. And most of the songs that they did, they wrote themselves. So it was through life experiences. But he gave me that CD, and I did start listening to it every now and then, and I really enjoyed the music because it was the style of music that I liked, and I just listened to it. I really didn't pay a lot of attention to the words at the time, but God was on my heart all the time. When I went to bed at night, I couldn't get God off my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about God. And I would pray for people, and I've always prayed. I grew up around, Christians, Pentecostal, hardcore, my family, and things like that. So I knew, I went to church as a younger, we was made to go to church, just like a lot of people, and there's a lot of people, don't know who Jesus is and never been to church. Hopefully this will help you and give you some enlightenment on what Christ can do in your life, just like he did in mine. This is just my story, and I hope it touches somebody out there and it changes their life. But I had that CD and I was listening to it, and God was starting to knock on my heart, drawing me and calling me into to walk in my purpose that he because he's got a plan and a purpose for each and every one of us. Everybody's got a plan and a purpose. He knew us before we was born, and he had a purpose for us. Because God, in the Bible, it talks about he knows the beginning from the end. So he knew all the mistakes we're going to make and everything that we've done and all the, whatever you may have done. He knows it. He knows it. He knows what the mistakes I'm still making, because I'm not perfect. I just try to walk the best that I can, and I still make mistakes. I still got this mind up here. It's a free thinking machine that just goes off sometimes, and we have no control over it. So God was calling me, and I would be watching TV, flipping the channels, as most men do, channel searching, and something would catch my eye, and I'd stop and listen to it, and it would be somebody sharing their testimony and telling how God changed their life, and I would, just getting it in my memory and tell me how God's changed people's lives, just like I'm sharing with you how he changed my life. So my buddy Jalen, I would see him every now and then, and he said, "Hey man, I got to put on this wrestling show," and I've always enjoyed wrestling since I was a kid. Growing up my entire life, loved to watch wrestling. It was just one of those things that we did on Saturday morning, and I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'd like to go to that wrestling show." And my son, he was young at the time, probably 7, 8, and I asked him if he wanted to go, and we went down, and it was pretty cool, but it was a Christian wrestling event. I didn't know it. I just thought it was wrestling, but it was Christian wrestling. And I was like, man, I'd like to be a part of that sometime. I mean, that's really cool. I like that. Needless to say, I did become a part of it for a while after I become a follower of Christ. But so I still keep having these thoughts about God, and my buddy Jalen, he was a Christian at the time and been going to church and things like that. And I was going from my house up to my uncle's to give him some advice on building a shed, because I'm in the construction business and remodeling and restoration and stuff like that. So I go on my way up to his house, I see Jalen's van at his house, and him and his wife was going through a divorce at the time, and I knew he wasn't living there, but his van was there, and God was speaking to me and says, stop there and talk to him and ask him about me. Ask him about God when I say that. And I says, okay. I said, I'll stop on the way back if he's there. So I went on up to my uncle's and spent about an hour and a half, and then I left, and I come down through there, down Thule Road, past his house, and sure enough, his van was still sitting there, but I just blew on by. I got down to the bottom of the hill there at 5 Points, and I couldn't go any further. I couldn't make it to my house. I had to stop, and I had to turn around and go back and talk to him. Something inside of me just would not let me go any farther. So I go back, and I pull in, and I walk around the back of the house. He's doing some work on the house, fixing it up so they could sell it or whatever the case may be. And I told him, that God's been on my heart, and I've been just can't get them out of my mind. And he, shared some things with me and give me some advice and talked to me about some things. And it wasn't too much longer after that. I was at my house on Gilmore and watching TV. It was around 11. 700 Club comes on like at 11:30 or something like that. And I was channel surfing and stopped on something caught my eye, and I just stopped, and it was the 700 Club. Pat Robertson was speaking and talking, and I listened to it, and he's like, if you going through these, having these things, and just talking right to me. It felt like he was speaking right to me through the TV, and he was getting ready to say the sinner's prayer. And I got down on my knees right in the middle of my living room floor at 11:30, and I put my hands up and I said the prayer. Right after him, I said, he says, just repeat after me, and I did it. And I changed my life right then. I gave my life to Christ, become a follower. But when I went to go to bed that night, I laid in the bed, and at the time I was married to my second wife, and she had already went to bed. She was laying in the bed with our son. She slept with him most of the time. And I got in the bed, and right when I was getting ready to go to sleep, this demon was coming for me, coming to get me. And it was as big as, the head was just as humongous. And it was coming for me, and I remember as plain as day sitting here sharing this with you. And I remember as a child hearing people say, "Get behind me, Satan." So I said, "Get behind me, Satan," and it was gone instantly. Never had a demon come to me since that point. But that's because I have my armor of God on, and I'm prepared, and I know how to handle those kind of situations, through Christ. It's not got anything to do with me, but it's through Christ and his blood, because he has the power over all demons. So I said that, and the demon was gone. So I get up the next morning, and I do construction work. I may have said that, I'm not sure, but I go to work, and my uncle at the time was working with me, and he didn't come to work that morning, and so I was listening to my in stereo music CD, weeping tears of joy, tears of happiness, it just tears of brokenness, and God spoke to me as plain as I'm speaking to you right here. I heard his voice, and he says, "I want you to call two people when you get home. I want you to call Vicky Neal and Ed Bannon." Now Vicky is married to my uncle, and they're really great Christian followers. They've been going to church, my entire life that I can remember. And when I would stay overnight with their son is a year younger than me, when I'd stay overnight and stay the weekend in the summer and stay all the time, because we just run around and played and had a great time. But they went to church, and we was made to go to church, and we went to church, and I hated it at the time. I was a kid. I wanted to be riding bicycles and going swimming and things, but that's Vicky, and it's one of the reasons I called her. So I did call her that night when I got home, and I didn't know why God wanted me to call her, but I called her and says, "Vicky," first when I called, I hadn't called them in many years. I just didn't call them like that. I would see them on Christmas and Thanksgiving and special holidays, and when they would come and visit and things. But I called him, and my Uncle Luther answered the phone, and I said, "Hey, Luther," I said, "It's Randall. I need to speak to Vicky." I said, I need to talk to her. He said, "Can you call back in, about 30 minutes? She's cooking, dinner." And I was like, okay, I really wanted to share this, but God was teaching me patience right there. One of the things that I've, been learning through my Christian walk. So I called Vicky back, and I says, "I got some news I wanted to share with you." I says, I give my life to Christ last night. and she was really, really super happy and ecstatic. And I didn't know why God wanted me to tell her, but He revealed to me later on that the reason I told her that He had me do that was because I didn't know it, but at the time she was going and battling cancer, and she was going through some treatments, and her spirit was really low and down. But when I told her that I had gotten saved, it brought her spirit up, and she was so happy and so joyful. It gave her strength to keep moving forward and keep dealing with the chemo and the things that she had to deal with at the time. And the other person that God wanted me to call was Ed Bannon. And Ed is been a friend of mine, still a friend of mine. We talk today. But at the time, he was a few years younger than me, and he had just got out of school, and he went to work for me. And some other friends, most of the people that work for me is people I knew or knew somebody that I knew. But Ed, God wanted me to call Ed, and I didn't know why in the world would I be calling Ed, just like I didn't know why to call Vicky until he revealed to me later why he wanted me to call Ed. So I didn't call Ed that night. I told myself and I told God, I says, I'm not going to call him. I says, I'm just not going to do it. So I go to work the next day. This is 24 hours after I got saved now. I go to work the next day, and I come home, and I go into my office at my house, which is, bedroom that we converted into an office for my business, and my answer machine was going off. So I'm sure you guys can all imagine who was on the answer machine. So I pushed the button play, and it was Ed, and he says, this is the way he worded it. He says, "Hey, Cheese, this Hammer, give me a call. I need you to look at something for me." And he gave me his number. So he called. My nickname was Cheese when we worked together, and we called him Hammer. And so I called him, and he says, "Man, I had a tree fall and hit my house, and I need you to come and give me an estimate to do the repairs on it." So I go out there and look at the job, and when I'm out there talking to him, I told him that I got saved, because at that time he was in church and going to church, and I give the insurance company a bid on that tree that fell and hit their house, and the insurance company accepted my bid. He didn't have to get 3 estimates. They accepted my bid. It was for around close to $15,000 to do the repairs, material and labor and everything. So I got the job. It got approved. I did the job. It just took me a few days to do it, maybe a week and a half. And I had a guy helping me, my nephew. When it was all said and done, I made close to $10,000 cleared, and that was enough money to pay off all my bills that I was behind on. Because when I got saved that night, and I give it all to God, and I put my hands up, I give Him my finances. When I was praying, I says, I can't do it no more. I've been struggling, bills is piling up, just like probably happening to each and every one of you out there. We go through it. Didn't have no money. Work was mediocre, in and out, sporadic. In construction, the economy had fell back then. It was when we was going through the real hard time with the housing market, and I was able to pay all my bills off. And then I felt in my heart that God wanted me to give Ed $1,000 for Christmas, because it was close to Christmas time. I was able to do our Christmas shopping, pay all of our bills, and have extra money. Plus, I give Ed $1,000, because one time in my life, when I was married to my second wife, somebody blessed us with some money for Christmas and says, "You don't have to pay us back. Take it, and then if you ever get an opportunity to pay it forward, then you do that." So I felt that God was wanting me to give Ed this for Christmas, and that was my opportunity to pay it forward where somebody had paid it forward to us. I wasn't doing it for any recognition, and I'm just sharing with you and everybody that this is how God works, and how God blesses, and how we are able to bless other people. So I did that for Ed, and went on my merry way, and at that time I didn't have during this little period when I first got saved, I didn't know churches. I didn't know I was going to go to church, but I had been wanting to go see the band play, the In Stereo group that I had been listening to. I wanted to hear them play live, and Facebook was just coming around about that time, and I was on Facebook, and I seen that they was playing at Princeton Pike Church of God at a Friday night youth meeting. So I was going to church by myself. At that time, my second wife was her religious beliefs, and we was different. That gets back into the Bible where unequally yoked people, they can't be together. That I was not married in the eyes of God, and we went through a divorce. So I'll share a little bit of that situation and when I get a little further along. But so I go to this Princeton Pike Church, and for people that live around here or that know me around this area, that know what I'm talking about, Princeton Pike's a pretty good sized church. They got been around for a lot of years. I don't know how many, 70 years or more in this area. They's a well-established church, had a good following, had a big building they just had built, and that story is is a story in itself how that happened, but I won't go into it now. But I go to Princeton Pike and I walk through the doors, and it's a big building, but I was just focused on coming in to hearing the music and listening to. Actually, I wanted to hear the music. I didn't care about anything else, but I wanted to hear the band. But when I got there, of course, I listened to the youth minister that was ministering that night, and his message was cleaning out your iPod. And I took it to heart. I listened to it, and I got to hear the band and got to meet some of the members and shared with them how they changed my life, and their music was what really got me saved, and part of what reason I give my life over to Christ, and I wanted them to know that. I wanted to share that with them. Nevertheless, I became friends with all the members of the band, and I'm still friends with them today, and see them out, and but when I got home that night, I was that message was still loud and clear in my ear, and I had deleted all my music off my iPod, and I'm saying to God, I'm like, God, I don't know any other kind of music but that. And this one CD, and they had, and Cheryl just put out a second CD, so I was able to listen to those two CDs, and I didn't have no other music. I started listening to K-Love and Air One, and then 93.3. I didn't know any of the artists, and music was a big part of my life. I always listened to music while I was at work and in the car, like probably 80% of the people. And for 3 years or more, I did not listen to anything but positive music, because all the years that I had this music from the world in my head, I needed to get that out, and it took about 3 years, because I had 42 years of Leonard Skinner and Led Zeppelin and bar music. So I listen to nothing but Christian music and get this positive message in my head that's uplifting and speaks life to you instead of death. So I was listening to that and got to still listening to that music today, you know, and know tons of artists and things. But so a little more. I had got saved, you know, like most people, and you think your life is going to be great and it's going to be a bed of roses. I got Jesus in my life. Things are going great. Well, about that time, like I said, unequally yoked people, you know, we hit. So my second wife and me started butting heads even worse than we did previously. So needless to say, you know, I thought my life was going to be good, but my life started falling apart. I went to jail, got kicked out of my house, lost everything that I had. Only thing I had was a suitcase and my truck to live out of. After I went to jail, couldn't see my kid, it's my son, couldn't see my son. You know, had to go through that visitation thing until we got our divorce final. But I went to jail twice in that time, and not that I spent a long period of time, but I went to jail, got arrested, and spent overnight. And then I had to turn myself in again for violating protection order by calling my son, which I didn't know I wasn't allowed to do. But just because you don't know you're not allowed to do it, don't mean it's not against the law. And it don't mean you're not going to get arrested. So I had to do that. And I got kicked out of the house, and I was living out of a suitcase. Spent a little bit of time at my mom, sleeping on the couch. And then I went and stayed at my grandma's, where I grew up at. And I was living in her basement in a 12 by 12 room. Had a house, had a truck, had a wife, had big TVs, had a pool table in the basement, living in my dad's old house, had an acre and a half of land. Highway needed to come through and widen the road. They bought a piece of property off of me for $20,000. I go from there to living in the basement. Been in jail twice. Serving Christ. Got saved. Jesus in my heart. You know, that's when my battle started. But I told God, I said, God, if I got to start over with nothing at all, I'm not going to waver. I'm going to keep my eyes focused on you. And I'm not going to fall into this game, and I'm not going to go backwards. I did that. I kept my eyes on him. Later on, after the divorce was final, I got share parenting with my son. He got to live with me full time to go to Fairfield. You know, in the divorce, my ex-wife had to do all the driving because she moved out of Hamilton area to Goshen, which was about an hour away. But she had to do all the driving to come and see him and take him with her and things like that. Excuse me, I'm going to get a drink here. But she had to do all those things. So God was working in my favor through that divorce. And also during that time, you know, when the divorce was almost over, my ex at the time, when we met with the lawyer, she said that I could have everything out of that house, and only thing she wanted was the things that belonged to her mother, that her mother had given her, family heirlooms and what. And I'm like, that's fine. And at the time, you know, God was working with me on my heart, you know, like about forgiveness, and I got over that, you know, and I spoke with Josh's mom and said, I want to, you know, get all this behind us, and I want to do what's best for our son, and I want to try not to argue and fuss and fight, you know. So we got along pretty good there, and we don't really speak now. Josh is 18, and he still lives with me, going to this last year of school, but God blessed me with all the things, you know. He started giving me things back, kind of like, you know, the book of Job. If you know the story or have read it or want to read it, read Job, and you see how, you know, he got all of his possessions and his family taken away from him, but he still kept his eyes on God, and he still kept believing in God, and he didn't waver. So I kept my eyes on Christ, and he blessed me, and also I was like, I need to get me a car. You know, the only thing I had was a work truck with all my tools and my construction tools on it. And so I come home one day, and I go to the mailbox, and I have a check, and then from the IRS, and you know, the IRS never sends people checks. It's hard to get you anything from them. They're always wanting our money, but lo and behold, there was a check in the mailbox, and it was for $2,200 or $2,300. And I had been eyeballing this car that this guy had for sale. It was like a mint green Cadillac, and I was like, it's like a 98 model mint green Cadillac. Man, it was pretty, and I was like, I hadn't owned a car since I was about 17 or 18. I had a couple trucks, but I haven't had a car. And he had a for sale sign in the window, and I've been eyeballing it, and I was like, I really like to have that, but I didn't have the money to do it. But God blessed me with a check for $2,300, and I went up and asked him how much he wanted for it, and he said $2,600. I said, I'll take it. He says, you want to test drive it? I said, nope. I'll be back tomorrow with your money. So literally I only had to shell out $200 of my own money. The rest of it was given to me from the IRS because, you know, I didn't expect any money. So I believe it was a gift from God. That's the way I'm taking it. That's the way I'm sharing it. God bless me. I don't know why, staying faithful, but he blesses. And I got the car, and it only cost me a couple $100 out of my pocket. He blessed me with it. So I drove that for a few years, and it got wrecked. A guy pulled in front of me, and at the time I didn't have insurance, but they had full coverage, and their insurance paid for my car. And I needed another car, so I started looking on the internet and found another newer car, and I bought it, and it was exactly, not a penny more, not a penny less, what the insurance company cut me a check for, which was $3,900. That's exactly how much I paid for it after taxes and fees and stuff. So God just keeps on, keep on. It's crazy, and I'm living it today. So I got blessed for that, and that the house was, you know, I was just thinking the house is going to be foreclosed, lost, but I did some work for a gentleman, and he was a real estate agent, and I told him about it, and he says, hey, you know, the government's got these grant programs going on. We might be able to do something here. I'm like, okay, I'll fill out the paperwork, whatever, you know, not thinking that anything's going to come of it. Sure enough, he was able. It took about 2 years, but the government gave me a check for $7,000, you know, out of the blue, and I was able to pay off my child support from my first marriage to my, you know, and I was done with my child support. It was all caught up, no more there, and my second wife and Josh's mom, we had shared parenting, and nobody had to pay child support there, so that was another blessing. And I got to work on the house. The guy that bought it paid me to do the work, to paint it, to fix it up, to change the things on it. So God just continued to bless, you know, through this whole process, and still today, I'm having blessings, and I'm going to hopefully share some of that with you. You know, I want to share that, and so part of what had happened to me during these things that's going on is I had a vision of Jesus had his hands around me like this right here, and I was floating in the middle. So when I woke up from that vision, it was a dream, what do you want to call it? It was a dream, and I woke up, and as plain as day, that quick, I went back to a car wreck that I was in when I was a young teenager. I was about 12 or 13. It happened on Friday the 13th. I was in a vehicle with my dad, and my dad was a drug addict. He took these drugs like Elvis was doing, uppers and downers. He'd take speed to get up and to go and do, and then he'd have to take downs to come down. And when you do those and you mix those drugs, it makes you a real mean person. And he was messed up on some downs, and I got in a really bad. We had a van, and we wrecked right in front of the house on Gilmore. And back then it was a really desolated area out in the country, nothing around but cornfields. So the wreck, we was coming down Gilmore doing over 100 miles an hour because I seen the speedometer. I didn't have a seatbelt on, and my dad slammed on the brakes, and we did a 90-degree slide, and we hit an embankment of dirt about 6 foot tall, big pile of dirt. And when the van hit it, we did what most people call was a NASCAR roll, where we was rolling like this. And we rolled about 10 or 12 times that I could think of. And we come to a stop. Well, it threw my dad out the window about 30 yards into the creek beside our house. The creek was not very deep at the time because it hadn't rained, but there was still water in it, probably about ankle deep. And I got out of the van and went, and my dad was laying in the creek. I seen him laying in the creek, and he was breathing, but he was unconscious. So I ran up and called 911 at the house, and then I came back and went to the creek, and I held his head up out of the water and till the ambulance arrived. But I only had minor injuries. I had 3 stitches in my finger and in this right finger, and I had 5 stitches in my right knee. But when it threw my dad out the window, the doctor said that he hit the embankment at 30 yards away so hard it was like taking a sledgehammer and hitting you in the collarbone as hard as you can. So you can imagine the force that was happening at this time, and I didn't have a seatbelt on. But when Jesus showed me that he had his hands around me like this, and I instantly woke up and went back to that situation that I had erased from my memory because it was a really tragic time. I hadn't thought about it in over 20 years, 25 years. But I remember when I was in that van and it was rolling, that I was between the 2 seats, no seatbelt, and the van was tumbling around me, and I was floating because it was in slow motion. And I remember it as plain as day that I said to myself, I was like, wow, I'm floating. And the van was turning around, flipping around me. So Jesus revealed to me in my vision that he had his hands around me. It wasn't a guardian angel. It was Jesus Christ himself. The images of Jesus that we see, hair, beard. Jesus, he was big, and his hands was big enough to fit me in. And when I tell this story to people, and I'm telling to you on this night, when Jesus saved me, he showed me that he saved me when I was 12 or 13, and I didn't give my life over to him until I was 42, and I'm 51 now. He showed me that he saved me, and when I tell this, I tell people he saved me for this moment right now, to share with you, to share with whoever I talk with, this story that I'm conferring to you, that I'm telling you right now. Jesus saved me when I was 13 years old to tell this story at the age of 51. He's protected me all these years because in the Bible it tells that God knows to be, when I say Jesus or God or Holy Spirit, I'm speaking of one person. Some people may not believe that way, but God is Jesus Christ, the Son, the Father, and the Holy Spirit. So when you hear me saying those, you understand what I'm saying, hopefully, or you can comprehend. But he saved me for this moment right now to share with you, because he knew that when I was 13 that I was going to be sharing this at age 51. Because in the Bible it says he knows the beginning from the end. He says that he's got a purpose for each and every one of us. My purpose is not the same as yours, and yours is not the same as mine, which is what the girl shared tonight in church, that God give her a revelation. And I've been wanting to make this video for a couple weeks, and I've been putting it off, and it's like 11:30 right now, p.m. here in our time zone, Eastern time. I got to get up and go to work tomorrow, but I said I'm going to make this video tonight. I'm setting up the camera and I'm doing it in the garage, and I did the whole video. I got up to check and make sure it was recording, and it didn't record. And I got to about this point right here. I walked over to check, and it was not recording, so I had to start all over. But I said I'm not going to not do this video tonight. I'm doing it tonight, getting it on YouTube so that I can share it on Facebook, and hopefully that some of my friends and strangers, whoever gets to see this and hear my story, how God changed my life and how God blessed me, and how God continues to bless me and my family. And like I said, I'm not perfect, and I still make mistakes, and I still act up, but I know God's in control, and I know God knows that I'm going to act up, and he understands that. But the enemy will lie to you and try to get you to turn your back on Christ and say you can't go back, but that's wrong. So Jesus saved me to talk to you, to share this story with you. And a few other things that's happened, you know, how God's moved and miracles has happened is I got an older daughter. She's 25 years of age from my first wife, and then she's got a sister, my second daughter. Her and I, we speak, but my oldest daughter, we've been having, you know, nobody intimidates me. I don't care who it is. Most people, I intimidate them. I've always been that way, and my wife will tell you that today. I'm getting better, though, since I got Christ in my life, and I try to smile more, and I'm more happy and more joyful, you know, and things like that. But nobody intimidates me like my daughter Danielle does. I seen her last night at a friend of mine's funeral, and we hadn't spoken in a while, and you know, I said hey to her and things like that, but there's just this tension there that I can't understand, that only God knows about. But I pray for all my friends, and I pray for my family, and I pray for my daughters, and I pray for our military people, and I pray for our firefighters and all. I try to pray for people, and I try to think about these people, and you know, God knows my heart and knows that I care for these people, you know, because I was in the military. And so I've been praying, you know, like I feel like there's a wall up between Danielle and myself, you know, and this was a few years ago. I've been married two and a half years with my wife Gail now, and this was before I met her, but I was praying for me and my daughter, you know, that God would move on this, you know, because there was nothing that I could do. I couldn't beg, plead, call, text, anything to get her to let this wall down. And I was praying to God about it during a church service, and I was just, you know, the music, worship was going, and I was, you know, just talking to God and saying, you know, I feel like there's a wall up, like the wall of Jericho, you know, and anybody that knows the story or can look it up, I'm not going to get into that, but, you know, like the walls of Jericho was built around the city, and they couldn't be torn down, but God tore them down. Only God could do it. And I was praying to him about that, and that was on my mind. And in this church service, a guy got up during the worship, and he started walking around the chairs, you know, where I was sitting, the church pews, and He walked around like 7 times, and I was like, man, that's just like the walls of Jericho. And this is what I'm thinking in my mind. I never spoke this to anybody, you know. I was by myself at church, and and the pastor was walking around praying for people, and he laid his hands on my back, and the words that he spoke out of his mouth was, says, just like the walls of Jericho, the walls are going to come down. I was like, wow, God's hearing me. I mean, I'm talking, he's talking to me. And at the end of church, I went and spoke with the pastor and the gentleman that was walking around. His name was Brian Ollie. He may hear this sometime, but I want to recognize him because he had a big part in that, you know, that situation, because he was being obedient to what God said to do, and that was to get up and walk around. He didn't know why he was doing it, but God knew why, and it was to help me. And just like Pastor Marvin putting his hands on my back and praying for me that night, he didn't even know. He just spoke whatever the words that God gave him. But it was about the walls of Jericho. So I told him about that night, Ollie and Pastor Marvin, and they, you know, like they was like, yeah, that's confirmation. They prayed for me about, you know, the walls coming down for my daughter, and I was like, yeah, man, the walls are going to come down, man. It's going to happen. God's doing it. So I'm thinking every day, you know, maybe she's going to call or maybe something. Well, about two weeks, nothing. I'm praying, I'm talking to God, I'm driving on the way home from church one Sunday morning, and God's like, you know, you don't never get up to the altar and get down there and pray about your situation. I'm like, I'll be up there tonight praying for you. You better bet your bottom dollar. Sure enough, that night I got up there and I got down on my knees and I was praying at the altar about it. And I thought for sure, yeah, that's going to do it. She's going to call me. No. About a month went by. Brian was back, Ollie was back at church, and he says, I got a word for you. God told me it was not on your time, it's on his time. See, because God's timing is not our timing. God is on the outside of time because he created time. You know, this is what he showed me later on, but he says it's not on your time, it's on God's time. So I have to hold fast and I have to stay fast to that word, because I prayed about it, person prophesied to me about it, and when that happens, God's word is going to come true. Moses, it took 40 years. Other people, it's taken some time. It took about 4 years for me. I stayed steadfast and I continue to pray and I continue to say that I know you're going to do it, God. It's going to be on your time, but I know that you're going to do it. I believe that you're going to do it. How you're going to do it, I don't know. But he did it. So I won't get into the details of what happened to my daughter. For the people that know me, that sees this, that knows who I am and knows who she is, they'll know. But some things happened, and I was at work one day, and out of the blue, I get a text on my phone. I was looking for my phone. I'm using it to record a video, but I get a text on my phone, and it was from my daughter. Out of the blue. Out of the blue. She sent me a text asking me about my cousin, and that opened the door. God opened the door. That didn't open the door. God opened that door and brought that wall down 4 years after I started praying for it, and I stayed steadfast over it. And we communicated back and forth, and we had more conversation and more text than we've had in probably 9 years. And she come over for dinner, and we talked, and you know, a short time after that, you know, maybe a week or two, but we had been talking, and she come over for dinner, and she sat down, and it was like a peace. It was just peaceful. We just talked, and we just, you know, Gail and Josh, and we just had pizza, and we just sat around and talked, and you know, that was because how God moved on that. God moved. God tore that wall down, and we spoke and we talked, and we went over, and she had recently was in a, process of buying a house, and she seen a table that I made, built for Gail for Mother's Day, and she said she'd like to have one, and I got some more of that wood, some walnut wood that I had 40 years old. I was able to get off my uncle, and I made her a table for Christmas, and I was really glad that I could do that, and that I got the skills to do that. I mean, I like working with wood, but I built her this beautiful table made out of, she's got it in her house, but God tore those walls down, and only God could do it. And why we're having this struggle today, just like I said, seen her last night at one of my good friends' funeral, Rex, and he and I was really close and good friends, and he got married and had children, and I got married and had kids, and we grew apart, and then I became a Christian and a follower of Christ, and I would see him out, and we would just talk, but we never really talked about God, and we never really talked about that. I don't know if I should have, but I feel like if it was my opportunity, I never pushed God on anybody. I always let them open the door. When they open the door, then I say whatever God gives me to tell them. But Rex and I never had that, and I got the tragic news, last week, that he died of a massive heart attack and taking lunch break. He did concrete work, and he's dead. He's gone. I don't know what his beliefs was. I'm hoping that he knows God and he was able to make his peace, or maybe he made his peace. I mean, I don't know. I'm just hoping and praying that he did. And I got to get up and speak at his funeral, and share a few words about, how I met him and what a great person he was, But those kind of deaths are the worst kind. Sudden, you just never expect it, 1 minute he's on Facebook giving somebody a hard time about the Bengals or a NASCAR driver, and then the next day he's dead, gone. That's it. It's hard to believe. That was a very, very tragic situation for his family and his young daughters, that's, my daughter's age, 24, 20, 19 years old. He's got an older daughter that I didn't know very well, but those are that's tragedy, shocking. But, God's a miracle worker, and we don't know why he does things, because he's on the outside of time, and we're looking at the now, and he sees the end of all the things. Just like I was telling somebody last night. He's telling me, he's like, Randall, he says, I got a feeling I need to get back in church. He said, I went to church for a lot of years down at, sat under Josh Willis and stuff. He said, but, I got out of it and started doing my own thing. He said, but I keep getting these signs. God keeps sending me these signs. He said, had this little thing, he lives in Texas, down there where they're having hurricanes, and lost his house and everything just the other day. And then this guy, and he's married to Rex's ex-wife, and they come to the funeral. He said, God keeps giving me these signs, man. He said, I was sitting out on the beach, and he said this thing blew up, and he pulled it out of his wallet, and he showed it to me, and it was one of the Jesus fishes, and on it said John 3:16. He told me that right before the funeral, and the pastor that spoke at the funeral just happens to be my brother-in-law. And he read that scripture right out of the Bible. And God told me, he says, I want you to pray for Ben. So after the funeral service was over, I motioned him to come over. I said, I want to pray for you, man. And I didn't just pray for him to be happy. I prayed for him that God would open his eyes, and he would have to yield to and surrender his life over and give it back to Christ, and start living that, because he knows that God's calling him, just like he called me. It took me a year I fought for a year, man. Didn't know how to give it up. But in the Bible, it talks about giving up your life to get your life. I've had more joy, peace, love, and happiness since I've been saved than I've had living out in the world. I I just can't explain it. I don't have time to share it with you guys. How much you know things that's happened to me that you could have told me when I was 30 years old that one day I was going to be part of a Christian wrestling ministry, and I was going to travel to North Carolina, I was going to travel to Mississippi, and I was going to be speaking in front of people, and I was going to be sharing this video with you. I'd say there's no way in the world that that's going to happen. But I've done those things. I've spoken at several different churches. I was part of the wrestling ministry, and I got to travel to out of town, and I got to be a part of that, and do part of my childhood, live it out, and I got to do those things. God, through Christ, I was able to do these things that I never would have dreamed of or imagined. But some other things I want to get to. How God, I was telling you I was living in my basement at my grandma's, and I got a little apartment, and He blessed me with a car, and and during this time I'm thinking, I don't want to go back and do the things that I did before, sleeping around, womanizing, drugs, drinking, and things like that. I said, I want to meet somebody that believes in Christ, that wants to go to the church like I go to church, and wants to have a relationship with Christ like I do. And I was thinking, there's no way, I dated a few people, tried to become friends and get to know somebody to make sure I didn't make mistakes like I did before, because I was married twice before, which I like to say that wasn't in God's eyes. We was unequally yoked together through lust, through, pregnancy, things like that. Reasons a lot of people get married. You get somebody pregnant and you think the right thing to do is to get married, and everything's going to be good. And of course, most people will end up getting divorced. But, I'm praying that I am Randall, myself is seeking a partner, a companion. And, I met a lot of nice people that I'm still friends with that I like, that's great people, but it wasn't my companion. It wasn't the person that I was supposed to marry. And I'm, finally give up. I'm like, I'm tired of looking for somebody. I'm done. I'm just going to focus on Christ. I'm just going to go to church. I'm going to do my, do that. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just learn and grow and listen to what the pastor has to say and listen to what God's telling me, because God's speaking to me and revealing things to me and showing things to me, like the vision and like why He had me call my aunt, and why I called Ed, and why I was part of the wrestling ministry, and why I'm going to this church, and why I'm sitting under Pastor Clardy at the time at Princeton Pike, and then why God moved me to Summit Church and told me to go out there and support Pastor Marvin, and I was out there for a lot of years, and been going out there again a little bit. A lot of good things is going on out there. Part of a motorcycle ministry that I got involved with, the Bloodline of the King. But I was focusing back on Christ, and a gentleman was at our church, and he was speaking a word over me, prophesying on me. In the church, you got to have the gifts of the Spirit working. If you don't have the gift of the Spirit working, God's not working. You got to have prophecy. You got to have tongues, interpretation of tongues. You got to have discernment. You got to have all these gifts, going on. I'm not going to get into all that right now, and you can research that or grow into that yourselves. But at Summit Church, the Holy Spirit was there, and the anointing was on that, was on it, that church at that time and at this time. But Terry spoke a word over me and told me that I was going to meet somebody. I'm like, you're crazy. Blonde hair like an angel, looked like an angel that we see in our here on earth, which we got a perception of what angels look like, and then the Bible tells us what angels are, or what they're going to be and what they're for. But it made me think of a Precious Moments angel, and said she was going to have blonde hair. I told myself I wasn't going to date somebody with blonde hair again, but lo and behold, I met Gail. And she looks like an angel. My mom said she looked like an angel. I thought she does. I think she does, still today. But when I met Gail at church on Easter, I wasn't looking to meet Gail. She was just there because her daughter was married to the pastor's son who played music, and she sang at the church, and she'd come to hear her daughter sing. And I was just happened to be telling somebody about Miranda and Steve, and she was sat behind, and she says, "Oh, that's my daughter." And I turned around and says, "She's really good," or something to that effect. I don't remember, but that was the first time that I seen Gail, who is my wife now. We've been married 2.5 years, date 3, and she's a big. We walk the walk and we talk the talk. I mean, we don't just go to church on Sunday and Sunday night. We go to church every day at our house. We talk about God. We talk about what God's doing. We talk about what God's doing at work, at her work, in our family, around us. We're always constantly, we hear something and it goes back to a Bible verse that I read that morning, or something that she has read that morning or studied on. So we're walking it and we're talking it. But that was the first time that I met Gail, and never gave it a second thought that, anything about dating her or boyfriend and girlfriend or anything to that nature. But Miranda, I've been pretty close friends with Pastor Marvin at Summit Church, where I've been going for the past 4, 5, 6 years. I don't know, and we become good friends, and we go out and eat and shoot guns, and we like to do things. We like to have fun. Most people don't think when you become a Christian or a follower of Christ. I like to say follower of Christ, because when you say you're a Christian, automatically people's antennas go up and they got a bad perception of a Christian. I like to say I'm a follower of Christ, because that's what we're supposed to be. Follower of Christ. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, but I strive to be Christ-like. So I was talking to Miranda, and she says, "Oh yeah, that's my mom. They had a water leak at their house or something, and they asked me if I could help them, because I do construction and I know people that do water and stuff like that. So I helped them fix their water, and they owed me lunch. I didn't take any pay for it. I just helped them do it because they didn't have a lot of money, and it costs a lot of money to get somebody with a backhoe to come out to dig up your yard and things. But I had a good friend of mine he's in heaven now, Babe Baker. He was a good Christian man, and he come out and dug the hole and everything, and I did the work, and he charged him a small fee, but that's because it costs money to move heavy equipment around and stuff like that. But I just told them they had to buy me dinner, which they still owe me dinner. Miranda, Steve, if you see this video, it's been like 4 years and you still owe me dinner. But that's okay. I told Miranda, I says, if I knew that was your mom, I would have just had you fix me up with her, and you wouldn't have to owe me dinner or buy me dinner, but in a joking way, of course. But I seen Gail, again. Didn't really talk to her, just seen her, and I was checking her out. I was like, oh, she's, going to be single, I was checking her out, because before I just said hi to her. I wasn't looking at her, but this time I was kind of scoping her out to see if she looked like an angel or not. So the third time that I seen her and we spoke, we've been together ever since. So it was definitely a God thing, and you know, God's blessed us. When we got married, she lived in Trenton, where we live at now, not this house, but in this area, and I lived in Hamilton area because her son was 8, you know, at the time, 16, 17, going to school here. My son was 16, 17, going to school there. So we had to try to figure out where we was going to live, but we got married and we lived apart for a couple months. We just stayed together on the weekends till we could find us a place to live. And but at that time, I got a little bit ahead of myself, but I want to back up a little bit. But I met Gail. We was dating, and the first date we went on, I think I borrowed my buddy's motorcycle and we went motorcycle riding. I asked her if she liked bikes, and I sold my first motorcycle, or my last motorcycle I sold when my first daughter was born. So it was like 22 years since I owned a motorcycle, but I would ride one every now and then. And so I took Gail, our first date, we went riding with some friends of ours and had a really good time. And that got that fire stirred back up in me about wanting a motorcycle again. So I started, you know, praying to God, I didn't pray and ask God to give me a motorcycle. I just was saying, like, if I get another motorcycle, God's going to bless me with it. Just like he blessed me with a car, which, you know, I got a check. I had to put some money in it and I had to go out and do it. But I started looking at motorcycles, and I told Gail, because I really felt in my heart that we was going to get married and be together because it was a God thing. She was in the church and I was in the church, and we was going to church together, you know. And I says, I think I want to buy a motorcycle. At that time I was doing a job that was paying pretty good, and I was making some really good money, and you know, I said, I think I want to buy that motorcycle. I said, but if we get married, I says, we won't be able to go on a honeymoon or nothing. I says, I'll buy a motorcycle and we can have a lifetime of fun, or we could go on a honeymoon and just have 3 or 5 days of enjoyment, and that's it. So she says, okay, if you want to buy, because I wanted her to be in agreement with me buying this motorcycle. You know, I wanted to share that I wanted to do this, because the motorcycle that I went and looked at, which is the one that I have now, it was going to be like a $1,300 payment for 3 months to pay it off. I had to pay $1,300 a month. The total was like $6,000. Excuse me while I take another drink. Sorry, but I've been talking here for about an hour and getting a little dry. But it's the motorcycle that I still have today. So I ended up getting on it and going ahead and putting that money out there and taking that step of faith, you know, because they only wanted like $6,000 for it, and it was wrecked, but there was no major damage. And one of my best friends owns a body shop, so I knew that he could fix it, or we could get it fixed, or we could take care of it. And he went out and looked at it with me to make sure that, you know, I was making the right choice, and he would be able to fix it, or we would be able to get it done, because it would have a salvage title. Here in Ohio, you know, you have to have it inspected and through the highway patrol to get your license and stuff. So Gail agreed with me on buying it, and I was making it. And about that time, the job that I was on was finishing up, and I didn't really have the money to make the last payment, and I done had made these other payments, and I was like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do here. I said, I don't really have that kind of money to put out. And I was talking to God, and I was shaving, and I usually, when I shave or take a shower, I really, you know, kind of alone time with God and talk to him. I was like, God, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I got to make this payment here next couple days, $1,300, and I ain't even got near that amount of money. I said, but I got to, at this time, my dad was passed away, and one of his best friends is a good friend of mine. And I says, I know this guy. If I asked him and I really needed to borrow it, I know that he would help me out. I said, but I'm not going to call him. I said, if he calls me, I said, I'll ask him. I'll tell you this right now. I'll tell you, it wasn't 30 seconds later, my phone rang, and it was that person name popped up on the caller ID. I answered, and I says, he's not religious, man. He don't go to church. I said, I got to tell you this, man. I said, I was talking to God, and I said, I need to borrow some money. I said, but I don't have it. And I said, I know that you got it, and if I needed to borrow it, you would loan it to me. I said, but I'm not going to call you. I says, if you call me, I'll ask you. And I said, 30 seconds later, the phone rang, and here I am talking to you. His exact words was, how much you need, and when you want it. I says, God, when God does something, it don't matter if you're serving him or not. Just like I said earlier, I said, he makes the rocks cry out. So he can make somebody that's not serving him do just that he can make me do or have me do. Just like he says, how much you need and when do you want it? And I told him, and he says, come and get it tomorrow. I have it. So I was able to get the motorcycle, and then I paid him back, and, was able to make payments to pay him back. But I tell you what, I got a house, me and my wife. He blessed me with a motorcycle, blessed me with a car, blessed me with my son, put my daughters back in my life. Miracle after miracle after miracle. When you think there's no way that it could possibly be done, God moves just like that, and it's done. He tears down walls. He lifts people up. He gave me a motorcycle. Of course, I had to make payments on it and work on it, but my wife Gail agreed on it, and she's been riding with me. And then she says, she said, I'd like to get a motorcycle and learn how to ride. She never ridden a motorcycle before in her life. And I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Maybe sometime you will get a motorcycle. When you pay your car off, or when I hit the lottery, or when you hit the lottery. Yeah, I play the lottery every now and then. I could build a couple new churches if I win $300 million. I'm sure that Pastor Marvin would be happy to take some of that money and Bloodline of the King pay for a building, or Pastor Tony down in Florida could use a new church. I would definitely bless some people and try to do some good things. So yeah, I play a lottery, but needless to say, that's what I said. Yeah, you get a motorcycle if we hit the lottery or something. But one day we was out riding with some friends of ours, and it was actually Labor Day weekend, which just passed about a week or two ago, and we was just out, and we decided we was going to stop at the Harley shop because one of the guys was wanting to buy a new motorcycle, trade his in, and he's looking for something. And so we stopped at the Harley shop for four couples, and we started looking at bikes. And my wife, I was like, sit on that one right there and see how you look. Man, she looked good on it. That's the one she got too. She looked really good on it. And then my other buddy, his wife was sitting on a motorcycle, and then my other buddy, his wife was sitting on a motorcycle. And she's like, there's no way I can get a motorcycle. We couldn't afford it. They're not going to loan us no money to get a motorcycle. My buddy says, just fill out the paperwork. What's it hurt? So I filled out the paperwork, and she filled out the paperwork, and he filled out the paperwork, and they filled out I'm talking about Lane and Kelly and Ricky and Bertle and Gail and myself. So there was four couples, and three of us was buying bikes that day. They was like, okay, Gail got approved for her bike. Lane got approved for Kelly's bike. Ricky and Bertle got a bike. We bought 3 Harleys that day. Didn't go in expecting, except for Kevin, to get a motorcycle, and they didn't have what he was looking for, so he didn't get one. But we bought 3 Harleys that day. Gail didn't have no motorcycle license, never ridden a motorcycle. Kelly didn't have no license. Bertle had a license, and she was the only one. So I had to go pick up Gail's bike the next day or two, and Lane went and picked up Kelly's bike. I took Gail over here to Edgewoods High School and told her how to ride and taught her how to ride, and she only fell over one time since she's had it. And she took the class at D. Russell Lee. Now she's got her license. It's been just over a year that she's had the motorcycle, and in October will be a year that she's been a licensed motorcycle endorsement. And we all still ride together, and me and Gail, we take motorcycle trips, to Kentucky, Indiana, and ride all over. And Josh and Andrew's both 18 now. Both of them will be graduating school. So, but God gives you the desires of your heart. And I hadn't shared this with anybody really, but one of the desires of my heart had been to have a woman, a lady, or a biker chick, whatever you want to call it, but somebody that loves motorcycles and loves riding like I do. And of course, all my life growing up, I've always thought girls on motorcycles was sexy, and now I'm married to Gail, and she owns her own motorcycle, and of course I think my wife's very sexy, and she looks like an angel, and we go out and enjoy riding. But that's just another blessing that God's did. So I went from living in a basement, being put in jail a couple of times, going through a terrible divorce, losing a house, having nothing at all, being like Job, like I said earlier, being like Job in the Bible, to having a nice house. I mean, we rent our house, but it's a very nice house. We got a swimming pool. We got a couple motorcycles. Gail's got a great job. I've been working steady for 2.5 years nonstop. Got healthy kids. My 2 daughters, one's in the Navy, the other one's law enforcement, and we was invited over to my ex-wife and her husband's house for my daughter's coming home party from being out in the ocean on the ship for like 6 months, 9 months, and going from hating to loving, and like I said, God changed the way I think about people. He's changed the way I look at things, and he showed me how to love, and he showed me what love feels like. And I'm saying this because this is just my story that I'm sharing with you. Anybody that watches this, that I hope that maybe it touches your life, and you're thinking, wow, if Randall can do it, if he can do that for Randall, and he does that for Randall and Gail, then he can do it for me. And that's exactly the truth, because it says he's no respecter of man. It doesn't matter who you are. It don't matter if you're a drug addict. It don't matter if you're a drug dealer. It don't matter if you killed somebody. It don't matter if you got suicidal thoughts. It don't matter if you're a womanizer, a sex addict, a drug addict, an alcoholic. I was all of those things. And God changed my life when I got down on my knees that night, and in my living room. I wasn't in a church. I wasn't nowhere. So I just got down on my knees, repeated after Pat Robertson, asked Christ to come in my life, and he's just been blessing me over and over and over. Do I have struggles? Yes. Do I have battles? Yes. Do I put on the whole armor of God? Yes. Do I have to put it on every day? Yes. Do I have to ask God for forgiveness? Yes. Do I still get angry? Yes. But has he given me peace? Yes. Has he given me understanding? Yes. Has he shown me love? Yes. Has he shown me how to love people? Yes. Give me patience? Yes. Now I get the biggest enjoyment of letting people pull out in front of me on the road these days. That's the craziest thing, right? But just like this morning, you know, I'm coming down to the intersection. There's a lot of traffic, very congested here in Trenton, and I just like to let people out in front of me, and you know, and I hope it makes their day, you know, or buy somebody lunch, or smile to somebody, or hold the door for somebody, or say, "Have a great day. How you doing? It's good to see you." So that's part of my story. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that I left out, and I just try to hit these parts, you know. But I just want that you, whoever may watch this, to know that God changed my life. He can change your life. I hope it's helped somebody, and I hope you watch the whole thing and it touches your life. But I just wanted to share my story, and I thank you for watching.